Hello, welcome back to our animation course. So we have pretty much most of the scenes set up and ready to go. If you hit play here, you'll see the spaceship with its camera flies around and gets to the landing gear where most of the movement is happening, with the landing gear arms and the ship itself reacting to landing. Get closer here and watch as these arms open up and the ship comes in. So for this final part of the animation process, we're going to be looking at just setting up our scene cameras for catching the action the best way we'd like to see. And don't forget, these spheres can be whatever kind of targets you'd like them to be. You can incorporate more copies of the spaceship to be flying through the scene as enemy fighters, or make them into asteroids, or have even just target circles for the guns to be firing at. Anything you'd like. So we already have one camera in the scene as a chase camera, kind of chasing the ship around. And while we're going to use that camera for some good shots of the ship as it's flying and catching action of the guns shooting, we're also going to have other cameras in the scene to catch the action as the ship flies by and as it comes in for a landing. So let's go ahead and create another camera. It gets created at the origin of the scene down here. I'll go ahead and scale it up just so it's a little easier to see. And while the ship's flying toward the targets, we're going to have this camera looking at it. We're going to go to panels, look through, select the camera. And let's get our view oriented. So this shot here, as it's flying through the scene going toward the targets, might be a good shot. You're just kind of framing the action in different ways. So we'll leave this camera right here, and then we'll go look through our perspective camera again. So we have this camera kind of watching the ship as it flies by. This camera is tracking with the ship. And maybe we'll have another camera looking from the other direction as the ship goes flying through the debris. And we're going to have another camera looking at the landing pad, watching the action unfold there and watching as the ship comes in for its landing. So go to create cameras. I'll create another camera down here. Panels, look through, selected. Kind of frame this in my view here. So as the ship's coming in, you can get a angle of it. That looks cool. So this will be our kind of our final shot, looking at the ship on the landing platform. So we'll have it come flying in like this, like so. So if you have a camera angle like this that you like, and you want to make sure that this camera angle does not get accidentally messed up or moved around or something, or just on accident, if you go to view, select camera, I now have this camera selected. I can choose the translate and rotation channels by clicking the translate X, hold shift, and click rotate Z, and it'll select all 6 channels for the translation and rotation of the camera. And go to right click and choose lock selected. So now if I try to rotate this camera view or pan it around or something, it won't let me. It's locked into place right here where I have it. I can do the same for the other cameras in the scene as well. Let's go ahead and name our cameras too. So view, select camera, we can double click on where it says camera 3, and we can name this, say, final shot camera, final shot cam, stuff like that. Something that you recognize as what that camera is used for. Let's go to camera 2. This is the camera that's going to be watching the ship zoom by. So we'll call this one, go to view, select camera. Again, we can lock it where it is by right clicking on these channels and choose lock selected. We can call this one flyby cam. And you're just kind of looking for cool shots that you want to use in your animation. Again, this camera, we named it before, but I think I lost the name at some point. So I can call this camera track cam. So yeah, we're just kind of adding cameras to the scene to catch the action at different angles. I'm going to create one more camera, I think, create cameras, camera, panels, look through selected. This one is going to be looking at the ship as it kind of makes its turn. And so I'm going to look for a cool angle while it's flying through like this. So maybe something like as it's flying through here, we can show it banking over toward the landing platform. So just kind of looking for an interesting perspective. Something like this, and then once it gets far enough away, we can kind of change the camera view to the one that's looking at the ship come in for its final approach. Maybe something more from above. You know, just play with it and kind of look at different angles and get the kind of look you're looking for your scene. Let's close the aspect editor to get more real estate. So we have this shot coming through. So we'll call this camera, I'll go to View, Select Camera, and we'll say Final Approach Cam. And then I want to do that one other camera I was talking about. Oh, and let's lock this where it is right now. Lock these channels. That one camera where the ship is looking at the ship crashed through all the debris. So I'll go to my perspective. I want to have a camera kind of looking at the ship as it flies through these targets. So go to Create, Cameras, Camera. Panels, look through selected camera. This is the main sphere that the ship's going to be flying through. So let's get a good look at it as it cuts through that area. And flies right by the camera like this. That might be a good shot. So I'll go to View, Select Camera. We'll call this one Debris Flyby Cam. Lock these channels where they are since we like them right now. So lock selected. So I added several cameras to my scene. So I have my track camera that's following the ship around. I have my flyby cam where the ship flies by the camera heading toward the debris and it's doing all its shooting while that's happening. I have my debris flyby cam where it changes to this angle over here and watches the ship as it flies through all the debris after shooting at it. Then I have my, we have to scale this camera up so we can see it better. Let's scale that up. So then I have my camera here that's seeing the ship come in for its spiraling approach. And then finally my final shot cam, let's look through selected, where the ship comes in for its landing. So yeah, I think with this kind of camera setup you can kind of get a good, some different shots of your scenes and kind of cobble them together in an editing software like Camtasia. There's also some like Final Cut Pro and different kinds of applications that you can cut scenes together. So before we do that, let's look at rendering and how that works. Go to back to my perspective. Up here in the My UI, we have Display Render Settings. That's what this little clapboard with the two little dots next to it. If we click that, we get our render settings. So we can set up how our scene will render. We have two main tabs. We have Common and the Maya Software tab. The Common tab is where you set up like the naming convention of your files that you're outputting, as well as how large the resolution is and that kind of thing. So as an example, let's see, let's go to, you can choose the image format you'd like. I typically use something like Targas or TIFFs or something. It all depends on your preference. JPEG are typically lower quality images. I like to use Targas because Targas can be read by Photoshop and other types applications that are not necessarily too specific. You can try to output straight to AVI, which is just outputting a video, but it can be very compressed depending on the compression types and such. So I like to use outputting Targas or TIFFs and getting all the files and then putting them into an application like an editor program to create the final output. So let's say, just for the sake of demonstration, let's look at our final shot. So the shot where the spaceship is coming in for its landing at the landing gear. So we can call that file name prefix. We could say something like ship landing. And then for our frame slash animation extension, I like to use name underscore number extension. And you see up here you have a file name example. So ship underscore landing underscore 1.tga or targa. This also shows you the path that it's being saved to. So you can adjust that path if you go to edit, change project image directory here to have all the files saved to a specific folder on your machine. Frame padding is usually a good idea to have at least 3 or 4. If we type in 3, hit enter, you'll see that instead of it being ship underscore landing underscore 1, it pads the numbers, so it's ship underscore landing underscore 001. That way, whenever your files are listed alphabetically, when you go from frame 1 to 10 to 20 and so on, they'll be listed chronologically in a much easier to read manner. So frame padding can be good. Depending on how many frames are going to be rendering, our animation composes of 250 frames, so we're not going into that 1,000 frame mark. So a frame padding of 3 should be fine. If you're rendering thousands of frames, you'll probably want a frame padding of 4, where you can list 1,000 frames in chronological order without getting the numeric order mixed up because the frame padding wasn't large enough. So our start frame, we're going to look at our final shot camera. So let's go to Panels, Perspective, Final Shot Cam. So it zooms into this view. And let's go back and see what frame we want to start this camera rendering. So it's going to be around 110 or so before the ship actually gets into view and comes in for a landing. However, we also have the shots of the doors opening on the landing platform. So we might actually want to have this whole sequence rendered, and we can show the doors opening, and then we can cut away to something else and then cut back to show the arms coming out. So what we might want to do is go ahead and just render a sequence all the way from frame 50 or so, showing all the doors opening, arms coming out, and the ship coming in for landing till the very end. So let's be a longer sequence. So frame 50 through 200 and say 220 or so. So let's go back to our options. So start frame at frame 50, end frame at 220. And by frame means, do you want to render every other frame? You would put by frame will be by every other frame or by every second frame. So you type 2. So it would render every second frame, every other frame. But if you want to render every frame, just leave it at 1. So right now you see my file name shows ship landing underscore 0050. It starts at frame 50, and the file names start at frame 50 and go to 220. If you wanted this to start at frame 1, even though it's rendering frames 50 through 220, if you say renumber frames, it changes to say ship landing 0001 to frame 171. So if you want to renumber the frames, you can say start number, start at 1, and also render every other frame like that. Or I'm going to leave it as it is and have it start at frame 50, and I think that'll be fine. So then renderable cameras. We're going to choose which camera we want to render. So in this particular case, we're looking at our final shot cam. Then we can scroll down here to image size. So it has presets that you can choose. You can also type it in yourself. So it just depends on what format you're wanting to output. If you're wanting something that fits, like for an HD, you have HD 720, for example, or full 1024 or 1280 screen. We have different resolutions presets here, or you can type it in yourself for the width and height. I'm just going to go for HD 1080. So width 1920, height 1080. Then resolution, 72 pixels per inch is usually okay, depending on what you're outputting. If you're wanting to save something that you want to print, like a big screenshot of your spaceship, you might want to increase your resolution, your pixels per inch here, so that you can print out a really nice high resolution screen grab from the animation you're creating. But I'll keep it for 72 for now, and then we'll go over to the Maya software tab. So here we have anti-aliasing quality. We have lots of different settings in here for getting different effects in our scene. I typically use some relatively standard settings just to get a nice general good quality. I usually like to use contrast sensitive production, and you can turn on or off multi-pixel filter. Depends on the textures you're using. Sometimes using a multi-pixel filter will kind of blur the texture, so sometimes I'll turn it off, sometimes I'll turn it on. You're going to want to do a couple test renders just to see how everything looks, and then make adjustments as you find them necessary. So I'll leave it on for now, and if it turns kind of blurry, I might go back and turn it off. Then down here we have ray tracing quality. Ray tracing I have turned on because right now the materials that I have assigned to the spaceship have some reflections, and reflections are only rendered if you have ray tracing turned on. So I want to turn ray tracing on for that purpose. Then you have motion blur. If you want your ship to be all motion blurred as it moves really fast, you can turn this on, and it usually is a good idea to do so to get some believability and some realism in how fast it looks. If you don't have it turned on, the ship will remain crisp and clear in every frame, no matter how fast it's moving, and it can look kind of odd. So you're going to want to play with this, turn it on, turn it off, and do some test renders and see what everything looks like, and adjust this to your preference. So once we have all this set up the way we like, I'm going to keep these settings the way they are. I'll hit close. And now with my camera, select, I'm going to view camera settings. I'm going to click this little dotted line to break off the camera settings menu. And I'll choose a resolution gate. So this gives me this outline showing the resolution that I've chosen to set my animation to render to. And this lets me know everything that will be rendered whenever I hit that render button. So as I scroll back through here, everything that is outside this box is not going to be caught by the render. So I want to make sure that everything I want to be caught by the render is within this box and framed like I want it to be. It looks like everything is safely inside this renderable window. And you're going to want to check that for every camera and make sure that all the action is being caught the way you want it to be, and make adjustments where necessary. This is with a resolution gate turned on. So now let's do like a test render. So one thing I've also done, I've modeled these objects all to be able to be smoothed before you render them, because right now they're all kind of chunky. I mean, you'll notice the landing pad has lots of little triangles that are creating these different shading issues. If I go back to my perspective here, so yeah, if you look at the landing pad, it's all these little lines everywhere. If I were to apply a smooth to everything, it will smooth all those lines out and make everything look a lot nicer before rendering. So I usually want to save smoothing objects to last after everything else has been done, because it causes everything to slow down dramatically. If everything right now was completely smooth and rounded while I was trying to animate, everything would move at a snail's pace. And it would be hard to actually get it to animate properly and work with the file. So I keep everything unsmoothed until I'm ready to turn smooth on. So with the ship selected, I'm going to select all of the pieces, all the geometry, and one easy way to do that is simply to turn off all objects from your selection masking here and just turn on geometry. So now I mouse over everything, I only select geometry and don't select any skeleton joints or cameras or handles or anything like that. So I have all of my geometry selected, and confirm that I do. I'll apply a smooth. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Smooth, go into Options here. Vision levels, I'm going to set to 2. I'm going to not preserve geometry borders and hit Smooth. So now everything looks a lot nicer and smoother and rounder where it should. You'll notice the landing platform no longer has all those ugly lines everywhere, and everything is now moving much slower as I try to scrub through the animation. So that's why everything was not smoothed to begin with. But now I can do a test render. So go back to my final shot cam. Let's just open the cockpit up and we hit the 6 key to turn on textures, 7 to turn on lighting. And lighting is an important thing. I have some lights already set up in the scene. You might want to adjust their positions. But now I'm going to do a test render, so I'm going to go to Window, Rendering Editors, Render View. Get this window set up here. And in the render view, I can go to Options, Test Resolution. And you can choose whatever these percentages you like. I'm going to go for a 25% settings, so it's going to render a much smaller resolution than the final resolution, just so I can kind of see what it looks like. And we're going to render the final shot cam. So this is the test render I made. So you can see the reflections that are all happening. So I think everything looks pretty good for when it comes to how the render is caught. The next step is to render a sequence at the test resolution just to make sure everything looks appropriate that way, because when you render the larger full resolution scene, it's going to take a while depending on how good your hardware is. So rendering a test is a good idea just to make sure everything looks the way it should, and it's going to take it's not going to take near as long to render a smaller test resolution scene. And then you can render the full resolution scene when everything is hunky-dory. My test resolution is at 480 by 270. So I'm going to do a test scene at that resolution as well, 480 by 270. So I'm going to go down here and I'll say maintain my width-height ratio. I'll type 480 and height changes to 270 automatically. So I'm going to render the whole sequence from frame 50 to frame 220 with this smaller resolution just as a test. Also going to check out which directory my images are going to be rendered to. So right now it's going into my spaceship work file, and you can change that. We're going to edit, change project image directory. So here it says images. If I type in a folder name such as test render, hit accept, you'll see now it's going to go into my spaceship work test render folder, which it will create when I start rendering the scene. So with my path set, my ship name format looks alright. I'm going to go to Render, Batch Render. And once I click this, I'll pause the recording because it's going to take a few minutes to get through it all, and then I'll show the final result. Hopefully in my screen capture software will test the playback of the renders, and it will play back smoothly on your screen as well as mine. So I'll click the Batch Render button and we'll wait for it to finish. Okay, so it took a few minutes, but I got a test render done. So one good way you can check to see how it's done, if you go to Window, General Editors, Script Editor, and here you see all the rendering it's been doing. It got up to frame 172, and I went ahead and just canceled it at that point since it render canceled, just because I had a good number of frames to look at to kind of see how the render result was going to be. So now I can go to Render, Show Batch Render. So it shows the final frame, which didn't quite get finished rendering, that's okay. Then go to File, Open Animation, Test Render. I'm going to choose the first frame, which is, in my case, is frame 50, and hit Open. And then it's going to start going through the sequence. I just noticed I smoothed those doors whenever they shouldn't have been, but that's okay though. So the ship's coming down, like so. So I saw I had some issues with the materials, but that's stuff I can change later. But you can kind of see how it's looking as it's coming down, flying into the scene. Yeah, pretty cool. So I think my flickering issues have to do with the lighting, and I'll work on that myself. And you can obviously adjust the lighting in your own scene as well to get an effect you like. So this would be kind of like the final shot as it comes in. And so another thing we can do is we can add a star field and such in the background. We can add some engine fire coming off the back and things like that. Lots of different particle effects and stuff for the gun shooting and things we can get to, and things you can try on your own in your own scene to kind of get them perfected. But I think this is a good example of how you would render a shot, and then whenever you're happy with the results, you'll see I noticed this error in the lighting, which is good. I didn't want to render the whole sequence because it would take, hours potentially to render the whole sequence, and then finding out that there are all these problems that need to be fixed. So rendering a test resolution like this is a good way of really seeing where everything is and making adjustments where necessary. So yeah, I think I can call the sequence done. When it comes to the animation, like I said, we can add lots of effects and particle effects and sound effects and the star fields and the backgrounds and things, but I think I'll leave that up to you to kind of add your own flourishes and embellishments to make the scene pop for you, add different camera angles and so on. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this course and it answered a lot of questions for you. I'm always available to answer questions if you have them. Definitely thank you so much for watching and attending this course, and I will talk to you later.